Today in episode 62 of the podcast, we will be reviewing the film Mickey 17 and the first two episodes of Daredevil Born Again. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
So before we jump into our reviews this week, please give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes every single Monday when they drop. If you're listening to us in the audio room, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And as always, go to willbringthepopcorn.com for all our social media info, all our archive footage, as well as our merch store so you continue to support the show in that way. We can't thank you enough for your continued support.
Yeah, so we're actually going to be skipping our news this week. There wasn't a whole lot that came out this week that was interesting to talk about. A lot of it was about Daredevil Born Again, which we'll be speaking about later. And on Sunday, when we normally record, we're going to be checking out the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention and seeing what we can come up with that for another episode. But on today's episode, we're going to start off with our film review for Mickey 17. So this is the latest from Bong Joon-ho, who most famously did Parasite, which won the Academy Award. This is starring Robert Pattinson as Mickey Barnes, Naomi Ackie as Nasha, Stephen Yeun as Berto, Mark Ruffalo as Kenneth Marshall, Toni Collette as, how did they pronounce her name?
Ilfa?
Ilfa? Yeah. It's, if you look how it's written, it's so weird, but it kind of matches the movie because this was a strange, weird, crazy, over-the-top film. But I actually had a lot of enjoyment and fun with it. It probably could have been a little bit shorter, but we'll talk about that as we get into the review. But if you don't know anything about the movie, it starts off with Robert Pattinson's character Mickey. Him and Berto, played by Stephen Yeun, they've opened up a macaroon shop in this futuristic city here in the future, and they've taken money out from basically the last person you ever want to take money out from, because they will go to the ends of the earth and beyond to get their money out of you or something else out of you. And so they decide that they're going to join this expedition to another planet so that they don't have to end up paying him back. And I think they were given about a week to make things right. And so they're splitting. And so Stephen Yeun's character gets to go into a pilot program for it, and he was fine, but Mickey, he ends up having to sign up to be an expendable, which is someone who basically gets 3D printed every time they die to be experimented on. So he's experimented on a lot. There's a lot of different versions, a lot of different copies that are made of him, but that's his job, that he just gets to go out and do stuff that no one else wants to do, or gets to trial a bunch of stuff, dies, and gets printed again.
Rinse, repeat, and continue. Like that's kind of the whole gist of the movie at this point. And then you start to dive into some like philosophical, like existential crisis kind of stuff that you talk about. Like, do I really, like, is this really all my life is going to be? Do I really want this life for myself? Because, you know, the kind of humor is, there's a lot of kind of poking fun at things in society, like, that goes on in this film. A lot of social commentary in this. Like, the whole running joke is you don't read the terms and conditions on anything you sign up for or what have you. And that's kind of poked fun at the beginning where, like, you read the whole thing, right? You understand what, like, you're actually volunteering to do this program. Like, what are you doing? You sign it? And he's like, yeah, he did. And then it instant cut, like, I regret not reading the terms and conditions. But it's just a ton of fun, man. Like, this movie finds a way to have very creative ways to show the different types of deaths that he has in this movie. Obviously, the name is Mickey 17, so you can have a guess as to how many versions of himself you see in this. So it's basically like you said, it's a 3D printed version of yourself with like organic matter. Your consciousness and your memories are constantly like saved and updated into this, literally a brick that they...
It's literally a brick
where they reimplant your memories into your new body when you're printed.
Yeah, because that's kind of a big important part of the film. Mm-hmm. Like, they back up his memories before he kind of goes out on a mission, so that he has knowledge of everything that happens before he dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a pretty integral part of the story, and how he's able to kind of, you know, be aware of the fact that he is, you know, multiple versions of his own self. And then you get to see some of the imperfections in this process, right? So you get a little bit of different personalities from each one that kind of comes out, and you're eventually left with Mickey 17, like the 17th version of himself, where you get to spend the bulk of the film with this version of the character who, you know, is supposed to be left for dead in this, predicament where he winds up not being killed, and he comes back only to find out that they've already gone ahead. And it's the one weird thing about this to kind of make this work is with every other time he's died, they verified that he's died and didn't just assume that he was dead. And in this time, they just assumed he was dead because, he gets, carried off by these, creepers, as they like to call them. And they assume he died, but nobody confirms it. So when he comes back, there's this 18th version of himself who is the double of him, and you get to, go on the rest of the movie with the shenanigans that happened with this. But it was a lot of fun, man. I had fun with the, Robert Pattinson really does a good job with like comedy in this film. Really, he's known more as like a little bit more of a serious actor in a lot of things. But I thought he was really funny in this film. Like his American accent was very funny. Like he kind of had like this frail up, higher pitched voice than you're used to hearing from him. And, it was a ton of fun to see the journey that this character went on, but I wound up getting a lot of enjoyment out of this.
That'd be incredibly hard because, just thinking of not only are you changing the way you speak to go from being, British to American, but you're also changing the tone and the way you speak with that. But he also had to do that multiple different times because each Mickey does kind of move a little differently, talk a little differently, look a little differently. And if some are more hunched over, more are standing up. So he's having to create all these different personas. So I think he did a fantastic job in the film. Like he showed just how good of an actor is because he was able to really make each one their own, like make Mickey 17 different than 18. That's different than 1. That's different than all of them. So he did a real fantastic job. Mark Ruffalo was so incredibly over the top. So kind of an underlying story point in is Mark Ruffalo is this failed politician. He lost election, I think, 2 times and then decided he's going to start this mission to colonize a new planet where he basically just gets to call all the shots and stuff. But basically his wife tells him everything to do. But he has these gigantic false teeth in. He's talking in a really strange manner. Like, he's done some weird, quirky movies, but this is one of the strangest performances I've seen. It was a good performance, but it was so wacky and weird and strange, especially with, you could tell the teeth were causing him a little trouble with his dialogue and speaking and everything. But I think he did a good job, but it was a very quirky movie. It was unique in that way. It was very unique, and because as we said, so Mickey 17 goes out on this mission where he ends up falling through the ice on this ice planet, and he's kind of left for dead while his buddy is in the plane and comes down and sees him there. Well, he comes and rescues the flamethrower, but just leaves Mickey down there. Like, okay, I'm just going to take this, okay? Is that all right? Yeah, okay. And so I would assume he goes back and tells him that he's dead, but there's these pill bug like alien creatures that they call creepers that end up saving Mickey and bringing him back out of it. And that's kind of the rest of the story. It revolves around these pill bug aliens and, the humans in the spaceship being the invaders of the planet and what's going on with that, and just how insanely over the top Mark Ruffalo is. Toni Colletta's his wife is obsessed with sauces, so she wants to turn everything, including parts of aliens and people and everything else, into sauce. She just cares about sauces. Everything has to have a sauce. Yeah. And so, but like I said, it's that quirky, it's that weird, but everyone does it so well. Everyone is so committed to this wild. There's even a guy who's even credited as the Pigeon Man. He's in a pigeon suit the entire time. There's no explanation why. Yeah. He's just in a pigeon suit.
Just in a pigeon suit. Working for the thing. But you have, Mark Ruffalo's character here is very much like he has a very cult-like hardcore following. So it's not a stretch to understand where they're getting some of the inspiration from this character from. If you're paying any bit of attention to political climates right now and what's going on in the world, it's very obvious who he modeled his character after, I feel like.
If you know his social media, Mark Ruffalo's and what side he's on a lot of things.
So you could definitely tell he's playing a parodied version of that, dialed up to 11. But he is part, his character is like the leader of this cult-like movement, is these followers that are willing to follow him to literally other planets to start, this colonization effort. And you get this, society that they have like on this ship getting ready to take over and, colonize this planet. You have the love interest of Mickey, who's Nasha in this film. She, she's like one of the main security people on the ship. They have a fun time like going over their romance and stuff, and then some of the fun, quirky bits that happen when Mickey 18 shows up.
She's so excited. She's like got two Mickeys.
Yeah, it's like the dual Mickeys though, because you have the very passive Mickey 17 that we see, who's kind of like the aw shucks, I'm just gonna go along with what happens, versus the Mickey 18, who's very much the I'm not taking anybody's crap Mickey, like the more like stand up, confident, I'll fight you. I have a bit of an attitude, like Mickey, that is a lot more intense, and you get to see the fun interactions between them, and it's just Robert Pattinson playing off of himself very well in this movie. Like, I can imagine this had its difficulties to shoot, playing multiple characters, like this, and I think he did a really good job with it.
Yeah, his performance was fantastic. He just, most people probably still think of him as Twilight, but he's done so much since then that's really shown the range, not only from, the Batman giving us the action side outside of Twilight, but you had The Lighthouse and you've had Tenet and a lot of other films where he's really shown that he is a really good actor, and this is another kind of good tentpole movie for him that shows off the range he has of playing this really quirky Mickey 17 with a voice, as we've talked about, that you've never heard out of him ever.
Yeah,
it's a very high pitched, but he makes that fit to the mannerisms and the body movements and everything that he does with him. The voice fits the character, and it fits the whole performance, and he does a fantastic job, because there's a lot that's asked of him in here, because there's a lot of running jokes with the 3D printing where they just forget that he's being printed out and there's nothing underneath and he's just plopping out, or they're trying to catch him or something else. So he's doing a lot of physical comedy and a lot of physical activities on top of just having the regular mannerism. So yeah, he was fantastic. I love Naomi as Nasha. She was so good about playing that hard character who doesn't take crap from anybody. But when it comes to Mickey, she's so protective over him. Like, she truly loves him, even though she knows he's going to die daily or weekly or however long it is. It didn't really establish if there's a set time in between, when they reset him, if it's, because you think it was that only 17 days that we had in there, 18 days. It's probably a little bit more than that, because we know at least with Mickey 17 coming back, there's a couple days that pass with that, but she's fiercely loyal to him, and I just loved when Mickey 18 showed up, just how kind of giddy she was. You got to see a different side of her there, and you got to see a little bit of evolution and change, and then some kind of wackiness towards the end where she's got to try to save somebody else. But it was a fun, quirky ride. Like, it's not going to be for everybody. You have to be able to kind of tap in and go along with the crazy, quirky, odd, strange. Just because there's some stuff that's like, okay, like you're really going out there with either the dialogue or just probably the strangest thing that takes getting used to for me was just how quickly everybody is like just not fazed by death. And with Mickey, just how easily they just treat him like he's a piece of trash to be thrown away with, because they just act like, oh yeah, we gave him some. Well, guess what? You just got the shortest lifespan of any Mickey at any time. It's like 15 minutes. Like, yay. Like, okay, like it gets really dark. Some really dark humor in that.
Oh, very dark.
Like,
yes,
they're just like not caring at all what happens to him.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, oh, you're dead. Oh, this is crazy. Oh, this has happened. Oh, hey, we know this is a very intense situation, but just kind of embrace it, man. Just kind of go all in and kind of give it your all, and like you're breathing in this toxic air, so we can develop this this vaccination that we can give the rest of our people to walk comfortably on this planet. So you have to deal with the fallout from that, but we're going to test your blood multiple times till we figure out this vaccine that we can give everybody. It's crazy, but it's where some of that dark humor comes in, and they weren't afraid to like lean into some of the absurd, gratuitous, violent aspects of death at times too, because obviously the bodies are so willingly thrown into that molten garbage chute that they called it, and
even if they're not dead yet,
right? And just some wild ways to to kill a character off, and like they're not afraid to like sever a hand or like go like a little intense with some of the like the blood, and even in sometimes where you know you got him throwing up blood in some cases. Like they're not afraid to kind of go there a little bit, and it was a little jarring just to see like how into it they dove into it. But man, like it really drove the point home in a way that I really feel like you had a clear, concise like plot for this story. You know what's happening, and they kind of move along the story in a way that, yeah, at the end it probably could have been about 10 to 15 minutes shorter with some of it, because I think they spent a little too long in some of the scenes that they did. But
some things, yeah, were just a little too stretched out and could have been tightened up a bit.
yeah, but I think they did a good job of keeping a cohesive story along the entire time, and it was it's very entertaining. Like it really is. You do have to have a little bit of a certain type of sense of humor, I think, to really fully embrace and enjoy this movie. So like you said, it may not necessarily be for anybody, but I think you and I are kind of on the same page here, where it was like we enjoy and appreciate some of those things that I think we both got a lot of enjoyment out of, and found myself cracking up at quite a bit of the absurdity in this movie.
I would say if you're a fan of like Starship Troopers or things that are absurd and crazy kind of out there like that was, with the humor and the political commentary and the action, it felt very much in that vein, that they're very much got a message, a political and societal message that they're doing, but they're doing it in a very dark, we'll just throw it in your face and see if you actually notice what we're making fun of or we're pointing at. And it's not even an American who did the film either, so it's talking about many different societies here of what they're poking fun at. But I would say, yeah, if you enjoyed Starship Troopers, this would be something similar in vein. It's not like that. It's less of the military and more of political and society than military as Starship Troopers was, but it does have that feel to it, especially when it comes to the creatures and talking to them and trying to do stuff with that. And they're very interesting looking pill bug creatures. But the special effects wise, I thought it looked very good. There wasn't really anything that stood out to me. Like when you have multiple of the same people on screen, it looked fine. It looked good. You didn't really notice any, because sometimes you get that look that you can tell like, well, yeah, there's two people not really standing next to each other here. It actually looked pretty solid. And yeah, the dark humor, it's definitely dark. Like it's definitely dark and quirky, but if that's your thing, I think you're going to have a really good time with Mickey 17. Like there's nothing really negative I could say about the film other than just it needed to shorten up just a little bit. It was about 2 hours and 17 minutes. It probably could have done it right about 2 hours if they could have tightened a few things up. Because there are some things that they just drug on, like, well, we didn't really need to spend that much time, or this really wasn't that important. But overall, like, everyone kind of just dove right into the quirky, absurd, over-the-topness that this story was, and I had a good time.
You can tell everybody that was a part of this movie had a lot of fun making it. Like you just tell it was a blast for everybody, because there's just some really absurd things that happen in this that you're just like, okay, I'll go along with it, but it works. It's not one of those like, this is dumb, why is this in the movie kind of thing, which I think goes to show some of the brilliance in the writing for this movie. It's like, you kind of embrace the weird, like you say, and you kind of just go along for the ride. Like you said, it was a ton of fun. We had, humor, we had a little bit of violence, we had a little bit of thought-provokingness, like a little bit of that existential crisis that Mickey deals with, like, hey, who says I have to die? Like, this is kind of where he's like dealing with the inner turmoil that he has, like, hey, like, understand what I signed up for. And for a while I was fine, but now I feel like I have this sense of purpose. Like, I think I'm finally the version of myself that I want to be, and I don't want to lose that. You kind of see some of that come into play here a little bit, which was a neat path for the story to take, and I think they did a really good job of seeing that all the way through to the end of the movie, where we got the resolution that we did, and it worked for the story that they were trying to tell. It really did, because you kind of go along with this guy's expendable, ha ha ha, and then you're like, okay, he finally gets it. He's like, okay, now maybe I don't want to go through with this forever. How can I kind of, put a stop to this and get out of this, never-ending circle that I seem to be in? Like, I kind of am in a good place with myself, and it was, and in my opinion, a pretty good message that they sent to it by the end of the film that really kind of just landed really nicely at the end for me.
Yeah, because it's also important to the story that, the printing of human beings has been outlawed on Earth, and they're only allowing it to happen in space here. And of course, there's a lot of social and political commentary on that and why it's used and how it's used and stuff. But they agreed that there was only going to be one, so he is the only expendable around. So that's what I kind of talk about with everyone just being so okay, no matter who they were with. Because there was one death who was like, you don't look so good. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Like, while he's dying, just saying, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. Like, just, all right, I'm just going to walk on while you're dying.
Like, no big deal. It's not me.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, it's weird, it's quirky, but it's fun. Like Robert Pattinson, this is one of the better performances he's had, and he's had some great performances, but I think he really showed a lot of different dimensions to his acting ability because he creates these different versions and makes them all different characters. They all feel a little bit different. They all feel like they are not the exact same person, even though they are. Yeah. And he does a fantastic job doing that. And, you know, you can also connect to him quite a bit because he's kind of a guy who's just, he shouldn't have been here. He trusted a guy that he shouldn't have, who calls him his best friend, but they're not really best friends, or just kind of stuck in this situation. He's just kind of one of those guys, like, he's too shy to speak up for himself and just goes along with it. And he finally starts finding kind of his voice as it goes on. As you mentioned, as more and more copies and more deaths are happening, he's starting to reflect a little bit more and think a little bit more and going on that. There's some good messages that you can find throughout this movie in a lot of different ways that, you know, they talk on a lot of different subjects and a lot of different things about how we treat ourselves, how you treat others, from, you know, society treats us, how politicians treat us. There's a lot to dissect from the movie, and I really hope a lot of people go see this because I think it's worth seeing in theaters. It sounded great. It looked great. You know, it's a big sci-fi film. It's not a big sci-fi action blockbuster, but it's a big sci-fi film.
Yeah, and it's one that's definitely got, like you said, some really good messaging on it. The writing is really done well. Some really great acting performances. It tells a cohesive story all the way through. You're not really losing the plot anytime in this movie. Like, you understand what's going on. They do a good job of keeping you engaged with what's happening. And really, all in all, a solid film. You know, he's shown why he's an Academy Award-winning director of a best film. Like, he knows how to make solid movies in a way that makes sense and can connect with people because, you know, Parasite was brilliant. I love the movie Parasite. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. It won the Academy Award for a reason. It is a fantastic film. He's a phenomenal filmmaker, but I think he's got another really well done movie on his hands here. People were unsure about, you know, hey, can he make this work in a science fiction movie? How does it work in this? And I really think he kind of knocked it out of the park with this one. Like, he really did a good job of kind of dispelling that. It just goes to show how talented of a director he really is. Like I said, Parasite's a brilliant film. You know, go watch it. It's well worth your time. But, you know, I think he's got another really solid movie on his hands, and it shows that he's pretty versatile as a director and as a filmmaker to, you know, kind of step into other genres and do them really well, which is the sign of, you know, a really fantastic director. And I'd love to see, you know, his next project, whatever that winds up being.
Oh, absolutely. But in the end, Mickey 17 was a solid, fun, enjoyable sci-fi action flick that is very quirky, very weird and strange and over the top, but it has a lot of charm, it has a lot of heart, it has a lot of messages that you can dissect depending on kind of where you see things. I think a lot of people are going to see this movie in different ways depending on their political or societal views and everything, but I'm going to give it a solid 8. Like, I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's a film well worth seeing in theaters. Robert Pattinson was fantastic in it. He showed a lot of layers and a lot of, you know, you've got a lot of sympathy for his characters and everything that he was going through, and he was able to play that through multiple different versions of them, and just kind of everybody played their roles really good. Mark Ruffalo was way over the top, but if you get probably all the different references that he was going, he did a solid job in it, and they did a solid job of portraying this. And I'm the same way of Bong Joon-ho. Whatever he has next, I really want to see it because, you know, Parasite was great, and this was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 as well. You get, in my opinion, one of my favorite Robert Pattinson performances to date. Like, it's one of his films I wound up enjoying the most. Mark Ruffalo is so funny in this movie. He's so over the top. Like, there are no redeemable qualities with him.
No.
Like, but it's on purpose. It's intentional. You laugh at the absurdity, but you're like, man, I cannot wait to see this guy get whatever comeuppance he's going to get in this movie. And, it's, you get a very satisfactory resolution for that, but he is so brilliant in his, his maniacness in this film. Like it's really fun to see Mark Ruffalo in this light, to see this him kind of embracing a role like this that he does so well in. I really got a lot of enjoyment out of seeing this. This is definitely one that is worth, in my opinion, seeing in the theater. I don't know how well this is going to do commercially necessarily. Like, it wasn't a highly attended film when we went and saw it. That was kind of our theater experience with it, but hopefully it does. If it does well, these are the types of films that, if you're tired of, the franchise films, the films that, if you're tired of seeing Shrek 5, if you're tired of seeing the 13th Jurassic Park film that's getting ready to come out, if you're tired of like the franchises, go support films like this that are more, original stories told by, fantastic directors like this. Give these types of films a chance, because your support of these movies will help more movies like this to be made. Yep. And studios aren't necessarily going to just dump hundreds of millions of dollars into another sequel. The sequels are fine. Like, I have no issues with that. But if you're somebody who's very passionate about independent films and new stories and original content being made, these are the types of movies you have to go out and show support to. And I think this is one that is worth your time and your money to go see in the theater, get that experience, and support a movie like this, so more stuff like this gets made in the future. If you're, like I said, if you're tired of seeing those franchise movies, these are the types of films you have to go out and support.
Oh, absolutely. So Mickey 17 is in theaters right now. We highly recommend going check it out. Like Josh said, if you want to see more unique films being made, go out and support them. If you go out and watch it, again, as always, come to our socials, come to our YouTube comments, our Discord. We're open and available to talk about all this stuff. We want to talk about what you got out of it. If you didn't like Mickey 17, come and tell us, and we can see what you didn't like about it. But because it's definitely going to be one that's going to be a little polarizing. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you like the quirky and the weird and the strange, you're going to have a lot of fun with it.
Which we did, and we do. So, we got a lot of enjoyment about that. But now I want to move us over into something I've been anticipating for several years now. It's the return of Daredevil. We have Daredevil Born Again. Episodes 1 and 2 have dropped on Disney Plus this week. We are finally getting new Daredevil content. I am so excited to dive in and talk about this show, because as you've seen, especially if you look in our archives of this past episode, where we kind of did a little bit of a recap of what has happened in the Daredevil series when it was on Netflix, it's now been migrated into Daredevil Born Again, now on Disney Plus. We got the first 2 episodes of what's going to be a 9-episode first season. I'm so excited to dive in and talk about this. I'm gonna tell you right now, as we're doing this weekly episodic watch along of how these stories are going to drop, we will be going heavy into spoilers on the show. So if you've not seen the show yet, go ahead and skip to the end and see how we feel, in kind of as we always like to do, kind of our spoiler-free review on our thoughts of things. But we have to give this, I'm so passionate about this show that we have to give it its due diligence to kind of talk about what happened specifically in the show.
Especially episode 1.
Beats. Episode 1. This is your warning now. If you don't want to talk about spoilers, I'm going to jump right into the first 5 minutes of episode 1. So if you don't want it to get spoiled, go to the end, check out our recap, come back and watch this part of the episode, or listen to this part after you've seen the first episode. That is your final warning. And now we're going to dive into it. So we get the beginning with the 3 characters that we all love. We get Matt, we get Karen, we get Foggy, kind of getting ready to head out to go to Josie's bar to kind of, let off some steam from a long day of work. You get these characters that we love so much, this core 3 from the Netflix show, together right in the beginning. And the first 5 minutes of the episode, we get something that you and I have both been anticipating was coming in this season. But they did not mess around, man. They gave it to us in what is probably the most emotional first 5 minutes of an episode in the history of this show.
I didn't expect it to be in the first 5 minutes.
Did not expect it. It was an emotional gut punch. So you get, like I said, here's the spoilers. You get the death of Foggy Nelson in the first 5 minutes of the show being back. You want to make a statement 5 minutes in, this is how you do it. You get the death of Foggy. Terrible, emotional, gut-wrenching. But I think for the story that they're trying to tell now, it is crucial that this happens for what you can see is going to happen throughout the course of the rest of this first episode into the second episode, to kind of see what story they're trying to tell of, Matt coming to terms with the fact that he's not willing to be Daredevil anymore. So that's kind of the theme that you're getting from this. But man, that first 5 minutes, dude, my jaw was on the floor and it didn't leave the floor for a good 10 minutes.
Yeah, to dive a little deeper in that, this seemed to be something from the showrunners, and even Charlie Cox and the rest of the cast talked about that this was kind of set in stone, that this was going to happen, that Foggy was going to die. Because if you're familiar, even if you're not, you know, when they started Daredevil Born Again, this first episode was kind of, I think they said they kept it mostly the same as they were doing before. They made some changes, but when they stopped and rebooted the show after a couple episodes, this was still something that they said, this is going to happen, nothing's going to change it, that Foggy is going to die. And yeah, it hits you hard because, you know, it kind of jumps into the story that Foggy has been hiding a witness in his apartment. And Bullseye is coming after the witness, but it looks like it was more of a distraction, and he was coming for Foggy. Now, we haven't really gotten the reason why yet, right. But we get Bullseye immediately showing up. We get our single-shot fight scene between Daredevil and Bullseye, which the only knock I can give on this episode was the heavy use of CGI, especially with the characters and some of the fighting between Bullseye and Daredevil. There was a lot of CG used, and you could tell. Like, it stood out badly. Like, I think the show looked great. It had a very similar look and feel to the Netflix series. It had some issues with dialogue and a few things here that wasn't as tight as the Netflix series was, but again, you're trying to go back to the well and take something that was fantastic and do it again. But if they would have cleaned up the CGI a little bit on some of those fight scenes, especially with Daredevil flying through the sky and landing on the buildings, like, you get that hurried kind of fall look that just didn't look very good. But yeah, it started off with, you get them three together, they're at the bar, you get Bullseye attacking, you get the fight sequence and everything going, and you get Matt. She's got Bullseye on the rooftop of the bar here, and he's listening to Foggy's heart, and you hear his heart stop, and you're like, oh no. And then Matt just throws Bullseye off the building.
Yeah, and in, you know, a very uncharacteristic move from Matt here, but what you get is you get this emotional, heavy moment. You get the death of Foggy, and it's, hey, welcome to Daredevil Born Again. This is what we're doing. Let's strap in and let's go, right? So you get a bit of a time jump after that. So immediately after the credits, you get a year jump in time as well. So you have the death of Foggy, but you jump ahead a year now. So we
don't get to see his funeral.
Yeah, you don't get any of that. You get a little bit of a note from, you know, the pamphlet from the funeral that Matt keeps on his counter in his kitchen. So you kind of get confirmation that, yes, this happened, and there's no miracles happening here. Foggy is gone, and, you know, we're moving forward with our lives. But you get
it's a maybe. It's a comic book show.
I know.
No one's ever fully really dead.
You know what I mean for the purpose of this story in the moment. So he's gone. He's not coming back, and you kind of get where Matt is mentally now. A year from now, he's hung up his cowl. He's not Daredevil anymore. He's kind of leaning into his work as a lawyer, leaning more into, you know, being Matt Murdock and kind of honoring Foggy's legacy by, you know, really building the practice that he and Foggy were trying to build. You get this girl that was actually talking to Foggy in the beginning of the episode, very much flirting with Foggy, that, you know, Matt winds up recruiting to rename the practice from Nelson Murdock and Page to Murdock, and I forget her name, and Page. I forget Kirsten's last name, but you get the updated name of the firm that they're working for, and they're working on, you know, making sure that not only Bullseye gets brought to justice, but you get these other cases that, you know, Matt is working on as well. He has a private investigator named Cherry who is doing a lot of digging into people's backgrounds and stuff for him, you know, kind of doing whatever it takes to get dirt and get info on people. You have, you know, him heavily leaning into, like you said, the lawyer aspect of it. You get a conversation with Karen at the courtroom at, you know, Bullseye's trial, where Matt is one of the key speakers at it. Karen finally shows up. You can tell they haven't spoken in a long time. They have kind of an awkward conversation, and Karen kind of goes on her business away too. So you don't get that much Karen Page in this show. So you kind of
because we found out she moved to San Francisco.
Yeah, she's completely uprooted and left, you know, Foggy was kind of the thing that kind of held them together. If you know about the relationship in Daredevil, they kind of were like a will they, won't they hook up. They were together, they weren't, they were kind of off and on. And, by the end, with the way that all played out, Foggy was kind of the one that kept the group, the three of them together, like as friends. And, with his passing, it's just, I think they see too much of Foggy in each other. So it's kind of this super painful, like Matt wants her around, but she's too, shattered emotionally to kind of want to be around Matt. So she kind of uproots her life and moves all the way completely, about as far away from Hell's Kitchen as you can if you move to, San Francisco, but on the other side of the country. And, she's kind of started her own life and doing her thing. So you get more of, what's going on with Matt now. And you get the introduction of Wilson Fisk now. So you get, there's this open race for mayor in the city of New York now, and there's multiple candidates throwing their hat in the ring, one of them being Wilson Fisk. So you get a little bit of that payoff from where you saw him at the end of the Echo series. If you paid attention to Echo, this is very much where Wilson Fisk is moving in his story. He's moving back to New York to try to, become mayor of the city. He's gone on this... He's calling it a self-discovery, kind of becoming a better man and a better version of himself, and he's entering into this race to run for mayor, and you get a lot of that in the first couple episodes here. So you get Fisk back in, full force here.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on a little bit that you do get with Matt. There's a lot of moving on. He has moved out of Hell's Kitchen. He is no longer there. The law firm, which is Murdoch and McDuffie.
That's what it is.
I was looking through my notes and found it. That's not in Hell's Kitchen either. So he's left Hell's Kitchen. He's hung up Daredevil. He's left the area entirely. So he is definitely trying to do a completely new and different life. And yeah, Fisk has been gone for a little bit, which is, important underlying story point to him and Vanessa, because we see Vanessa basically running the crime syndicate that they started. She's ahead of it, and he shows up to one of the meetings, which causes everybody to scatter. But things aren't great between them. We see that he's been gone for a while. They've been estranged for a little bit, but he's back to not only become mayor, but he kind of wants to win his wife back. And we see a lot of different layers. He's a little more shaky. He's not as confident as he was when we saw him in the Daredevil series. He's leaner. He's lost some weight. So we definitely see that there's been a lot of changes with Wilson Fisk. There's been a lot of changes with Vanessa, which, again, I'm really happy that they were able to bring Ayette back to be Vanessa.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Because she was great. They were talking about recast. I think they did recast her
first, yes,
before they did the reboot and stuff, but it was fantastic because they have, her and Vincent have such a great dynamic to each other, and they're able to continue that. So yeah, we're left in a really rough place here at the end, or within this episode, because Foggy has died. We've got their law firm is no more. They're out of Hell's Kitchen. Karen has moved across the country. We have Fisk back. We have, we get to see that there's another vigilante that we saw on TV with White Tiger, who's been, help kind of doing the same thing Daredevil does and taking down criminals and stuff, which is going to play more importance in the second episode. But there's a lot of setup. There's a lot of meat and a lot of stuff that happens in this first episode to bridge the gap between where Daredevil left off in season 3, where Fisk and Daredevil's been between Hawkeye and Echo, and bringing it all together here to kind of bring it into a new time and a new space for this new story to be told. And yeah, there was a lot of emotions. I know we didn't even get to talk about it in the last episode when we talked about the Daredevil Netflix series, is that Foggy has always been kind of an important character to us, but it's also been a running joke with us because Matt, of course, being blind, he has audio cues that happen from his phone when someone calls. So there's always been Foggy. No matter what, like if we're driving together or if we're going out, I'm even doing it with my wife as well. She's like, oh, it's really foggy outside. And I just look at her and go, Foggy. And she looks at me really strange, which is justified, but that's always been stuck in my head. If I hear the word fog, it turns into foggy.
Instantly, without fail.
But it's just to have his character be gone now and that quickly after, it was 2018, I believe, when the third season when it was canceled. So we've waited a long time to see him, and we lost him within the first 5 minutes. It packs an emotional impact to you, and especially what you're seeing going forward. But we definitely see Matt, who is struggling a lot with just being himself. He kind of doesn't know how to be Matt without Daredevil. He doesn't know how to just stop and not just be going and trying to track people down, because we get moments where he's sitting there listening to stuff going on. But then we also get, his realization that Fisk is back. And so he gets to know that Fisk is here, and they end up going to a diner together to talk things out.
It was a really fun scene. So you see some of that in the trailer for the show. You see this conversation. You get to see the full conversation now in this episode where, it is a cordial conversation for the most part, right? So Fisk is trying to play up this, I care about the city, I care about the people. I know you all don't trust me based on what's happened before, but I have the best interests in New York at heart. I'm a changed man. My plan is to outlaw vigilantism. If I get elected, that's one of the things I'm promising to do, is to outlaw people wearing, as he calls it, silly costumes, kind of, from being able to run in, an obvious, jab at Daredevil and White Tiger, who I'm assuming he's well aware of as well. But you get this really cool conversation between them. It's very funny and very on brand, and a lot of winks and nods to the previous show as well. So they kind of go through some of their history, talk about what they're up to. They're kind of feeling each other out. Like Matt's like, are you really changed? Like, have you really
done being Daredevil? Like they're just looking at each other the same way.
Yeah. And you get Matt, who's very clearly not interested in being Daredevil anymore. And you get Fisk, where you're still kind of like, yeah, maybe, but there's some, he's Kingpin. Like, he's not completely changed. But you get the conversation that they have, and they promise not to fight each other and all that
Although
stuff.
There's a great threat to each other at the very end of the conversation.
It was really fun and a really good conversation. Go watch that scene in particular. It's really good and really well done. The dialogue between the two of them is fantastic. But you jump ahead a little bit, and Fisk kind of wins the mayoral race running away a little bit. He gets elected as mayor, and then you get kind of moving into that portion of where this story is going. So now you have Fisk in charge. Now you have to start worrying about corruption on the police force. You have to start worrying about, him enacting everything he wants to do. And there's some ways that he's a very effective politician, where there's a really funny scene that made me chuckle, where he's riding to a meeting to go meet with somebody.
This is his second episode, by the way. So once he gets elected and is moving on, that's moving us into the second episode.
We're moving into the second episode, where Fisk is mayor, and he's going to meet somebody who is very vocally an opponent of his. It's the commissioner of I believe the fire department or the police force. I forget.
Police force, yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to meet the police commissioner.
At the funeral for a while. So we got to back up a little bit there, because it's all about that. We get a scene where some stranger goes down and sees someone being attacked in a subway, and it looks like he's being mugged or something else. So he goes and he tries to help fight him, and one of the guys ends up getting hit by the subway train. And so that guy dies. Well, it turns out he was a cop, and the other guy was a cop too. So these were some dirty cops that were attacking somebody. And when Fisk is talking to the commissioner, it's at the funeral for that police officer, but they're not fully on board with what Fisk has to say to him, because he shows up after the funeral was over.
Sure. So you get him on the way to this funeral here, and they run into a giant pothole in the middle of the street, and it's ginormous. It's a comically oversized hole in the ground, and it's kind of a fun play on, why does construction seemingly take forever? They're not really fixing it. Nobody's really working. And, Fisk is like all concerned with optics at this point as mayor. He's trying to get people on his side. He wants people to like him. He wants people to, respect him. He's all about respect, right? So he gets out of the car. He runs up. He doesn't run, but he walks up to the head construction worker there, the foreman, and he's like, hey, why aren't we working on this? why haven't we done this? He's like, well, Mr. Mayor, there's all this red tape. And very funny, and I wish the real world actually worked like this. He was like, no, I'm approving your permits. Go to work right now. Fill that hole right now. And conveniently, there's people around just to see him grandstand and do this and say, no, I'm the mayor. I'm giving your approval right now. And just like that, they're like, all right, we're good. Everybody back to work. It was just really funny. It was so absurd, but it was like, you know what? Had he done more stuff like that, I'd be on board with Wilson Fisk as mayor of New York at that point. But it was a very funny, like, one-off, like, it doesn't work like that in the real world, but in that one, it made me chuckle because it was a very funny scene.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of interesting stuff with him running and getting elected as mayor because everybody in New York knows what kind of person he is and the murders and the things that he's committed. Mm-hmm. But they elect him anyway, so there definitely is some political undertones where they're making fun of different politicians in that way as well. But I do want to touch on the speech that he gave at the beginning of episode 2 that kicked it off. It's happening on New Year's Eve, and he's kind of telling everybody what he's going to do as mayor, but he has 2 really good references in that because he's talking about vigilantes and how he's stepping up to it because, we don't need people running around with a skull painted on his chest, which is a reference to Punisher. But then he says, or dressed up like a spider, giving us our first Spider-Man reference here within, cool. The Daredevil verse because at least Kingpin has not met with him. We know that Matt showed up in the Spider-Man film and got to meet Peter Parker. So we have that connection, but now we've got Kingpin referencing Spider-Man at the beginning, which was quite a lot of fun. I did want to go back real quick to episode 1 because we are introduced to a new character called Heather. So that Matt's partner says that, well, I've got someone here who needs some legal help. I set you up a meeting with her. Why don't you go talk to her? Well, it was a setup. She was told that he was there to go to therapy because she's a therapist. He was told she was there for, he was giving her some legal help and everything else. So it's a really awkward scene where he's just like angry and mad and doesn't want to deal with it. But he finally okay, I'm sorry, you don't deserve this, because her relationship looks like it's going to play a big importance in the season. So, see episode 2, we get to see an evolution of that relationship continue as they're getting more lovey-dovey, and he pulls her aside as people are running down in a superhero way, and she's like, what was that? Oh, I tripped or something like that. He's trying to hide I shouldn't have been able to do that, but it's going to be interesting to see how that relationship works out because she is a therapist and she plays a vital importance towards the end of this episode, which is going to make things all sorts of crazy when we get into episode 3 and beyond, because she ends up helping out a couple individuals that Matt doesn't really like that much.
Yeah, so she's definitely a therapist. She takes on a couple. We just go ahead and get into that a little bit. So, like you said, Fisk and Vanessa are very much estranged, but they're willing to work on their relationship to kind of do it. And who do they go see as the therapist to help with their couples therapy? Matt's new girlfriend. So that's going to be the fun dynamic.
It's going to cause no issues.
Yeah, it couldn't possibly be a problem for Daredevil's girlfriend or anything. So it's a fun dynamic that they're going to lean into, I think, for the remainder of the season to see how far they go with that. But you do get the introduction of Hector Ayala, who is the man who is kind of at the center of this issue with the cops and the quote unquote cop killing, which he technically didn't kill the cop. The cop tripped and fell in front of the sub, but since these are corrupt politicians or corrupt police officers, they're trying to spin it like, oh, he's a cop killer. He gets roughed up while he's in holding. Matt kind of overhears this and decides, I'm going to take on defending this guy. And then he finally gets to meet Hector Ayala, and you can kind of tell by the conversation they have, Hector's hiding a little something that you're not entirely sure about. Obviously, if you know who the character is in the comic books, he is the White Tiger. You get a little bit of confirmation of that in this episode.
It doesn't take long.
It doesn't take long, but they do tease it. They do tease it for a minute, and Matt's like, you're good, I'm going to take you on this. He's like, I can't afford you, and he's kind of doing this pro bono here. And, you get what kind of plays out through the rest of this episode. And like you said, Matt is kind of struggling with trying to not be Daredevil, but now he's starting to get a little further into police corruption and defending a man who's also a vigilante that he's aware of. And
I loved his speech kind of scolding him because he's White Tiger, didn't tell him, like,
you're holding back a little bit of information too, Matt. Let's not be too much
do
of
you
a
realize who
hypocrite here.
you are,
Yeah,
Matt?
like do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. But it's really fun. Now you get this case moving forward into trial, and you get Matt and Hector in the courtroom, and the judge is very much pro cop in this case. Like, he's not hearing anything about anything involving Hector's story right now, so he's immediately like, no bail, all this other stuff, and like kind of not hearing the case. And you get a really fun interaction with Hector and Matt, where Matt's basically telling him, like, you can't bring up any of this vigilante stuff that you're doing. You can't bring up the fact that you're White Tiger, because Hector makes the argument, like, well, I didn't kill him, like, I didn't even have my amulet there. Like, if I had my amulet there, I could have, it would have been a different story, kind of thing. And Matt's like, you can't bring that up in the trial that you're White Tiger.
It also adds a different aspect that we haven't seen in Daredevil before, when we're dealing with an amulet giving powers and stuff with the character, so that's adding a different layer to the story. It's
a fun introduction to something in Marvel that they haven't really explored yet, which is a lot of fun for where they're going with the rest. And hopefully you get to see a little bit more of that from Hector in this show. But now you get with Fisk. He meets with the commissioner, who's threatening to resign because he doesn't like. Obviously, he doesn't like Fisk. He calls him a thug. He calls him Kingpin. He's very disrespectful to Wilson. Very cocky, very arrogant. Like, hey, I leave. I'm taking half the cops in the city with me. Like I'm getting ready to leave. And then you finally start to see that turn from
Kingpin gonna Kingpin.
Fisk is like, a little bit of that turn back into like, he's got this, conveniently has this Philly cheesesteak from a place that's very personal to the commissioner, and, kind of strong arms him and threatens him into staying on, and they kind of reach a little bit of an understanding that, like, I don't like you, but in order to protect my guys, I'll stay on, kind of thing. Like, it's you very much see that turn back into that vicious, like, thought out, methodology that Kingpin has that makes him a very dangerous threat in, the original series too. You finally get a little bit of that turn in here, and you're like, all right, now we're seeing, Kingpin with a little bit of power and a little bit of a power stroke and a little bit of a power move here. What's he going to do with it? And you see that kind of play off, and it's going to be fun to see how that relationship evolves throughout the rest of this as well. Yeah,
because he was like, some people think this is the best cheesesteak, but I think this one in this area, and you to see the commission like, okay, that's
very specific.
Where I'm from. Oh, you have a cheesesteak. Oh, you also have pictures of my family as well. So, yeah, we get to see that Kingpin who's going to do whatever. So he's basically threatening his family. Like, if you quit, there's no raises. I'm cutting this. I'm cutting that. I'm cutting this. I'm cutting that. If you leave, not only that, your family's going to be in trouble too. So he's like, well, what can I do? I've got to stay on. And I did love, like, we've got, through the first 2 episodes, we've had these little videos that pop up every now and then called From BB. And we finally, in episode 2 here, get to see exactly, I mean, if you've watched a Daredevil series, you have an idea that she might be related to somebody, but we get the confirmation because she shows up and she goes in to interview Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, and she doesn't hold back, and we find out that she's been Urich's niece, and that she's kind of named after him and does the initials, and she's doing these reporter internet videos where she's talking to different people on the street, and she's trying to interview politicians, and we see like she's very much a little mini Ben, which was great to see. He was such a fantastic character in the first season of Daredevil, and I like that they found a way to keep his memory and that character alive through her, and she's got a little bit of feistiness in her as well, so it's going to be really interesting to see how she kind of evolves as the series goes on.
Yeah, it was a fun introduction of that character too, and there's a really fun interaction that she has with Kingpin when she finally does get to talk to him. It's very brief and very pointed, but she's not scared to ask the hard-hitting questions, that's for sure. It's really fun to see the interaction that they have. But you do now get to the point where, the cops are desperate to, not have this get out that, they're corrupt, and you see, kind of a hit put out on Hector now, and really not so much Hector as well, but the one witness who Hector was protecting, that was the guy that was getting accosted by the cops, and the cops are looking for this witness, and they finally track him down and try to get him to a safe space. Well, they find where this safe house is, where they're keeping this witness, and they go to try to take him out. And Matt's now finally at this point where he's like, I really don't want to do the superhero thing, but I've got to save this guy no matter what it takes. And you get him kind of start to go back into that a little bit, and he gets to the guy first, luckily, talks to him to finally get him out of the building, to get him away from, he's leaving literally out the back window to, escape down the fire, escape away from these guys, these cops that are coming to kill him. And then you get a really cool scene where Matt's just kind of standing there as, Matt Murdock, but he's kind of standing like Daredevil, but he's, Matt, you just walk in and see a blind guy standing in the middle of the floor. You're like, what is going on here? And they're like, where is he? And he's very smug about how he talks to him. Like, oh, I got to him first. I got him out. You're not going to be able to.
You can see the Daredevil.
Yeah, it's starting to creep out a little bit for him.
Like,
but, he's still resisting the urge to really attack these guys and put them down like Daredevil would. And you get, he gets roughed up by these guys. And you get to the point where they're about to go through with killing Matt.
Yeah, putting a gun right up to his head.
They put a gun to his head, and they're like, hey, man, you can't leave this loose end. You got to take him out. And that's when you see it snap from Matt and Daredevil's back, and you get this really cool fight scene with him and the two cops in this room where he very viciously beats them down and takes them out of commission, and he lets out this guttural, scream that kind of ends the second episode where you see, he kind of, as much as he doesn't want to be Daredevil, he has to be the kind of thing. You get that, he comes to that realization where as much as he wants to not be it, it is him, and that's who he is. And it's going to be fun to see how they explore that in these episodes coming up. And there's so much more in this episode that we can kind of dive into and talk about and get to some of the other stuff that we haven't touched on yet. But it was a really fun spot to leave that off, ending in those first two episodes that they did, that I kind of get, that leaves you wanting more and seeing where they're going next. But it was a really cool thing at the end there to see Matt just let out this frustrated scream, no matter how hard I try to put this behind me, I can't. And it's a really fun dynamic that I hope they explore more for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and there's a little mystery given to us as an audience as well, because the corrupt cops had Punisher skull tattoos on their wrists.
Very interesting.
We already know from everything that John Bernthal is returning as Punisher. He's going to be showing up. How he takes to those cops having tattoos of him on there, that's going to be an interesting dynamic as well, especially to see if he ends up having something for Bullseye. I mean, we talked about Matt threw Bullseye off the roof. He didn't die. Of course, he was the one on trial and everything, so he's still kind of out there. So we'll see if Punisher ends up stepping in and doing something that Matt wouldn't do. But it's going to be interesting to see where this police corruption everything goes. We've got Fisk coming back into still being corrupt. We have the storylines between him and his wife, and probably that dynamic is going to change and snap something inside of him as well, because it sounds from the way Vanessa is holding herself and talking about him that she didn't really want him to come back. She had taken their empire to a new level and has done all this stuff, and he just immediately comes in and he's mayor and he's doing all this, and it's like, okay, what about me? I didn't want you to come back. So there's going to be an interesting dynamic that's definitely going to probably snap and send Fisk off the deep end yet again. That's going to trigger Kingpin to go even crazier and hectic. And yeah, I do want to throw out real quick that Camar de los Reyes, who played White Tiger, played Hector, he actually passed away from cancer, I think, towards the end of the filming of this first season. I think he got all of his scenes and everything in, but he passed away of cancer in 2023. So I want to throw my condolences and everything else to his family. I know 100%. It's been a little bit, but I'm really intrigued by the character. I mean, he didn't have a whole lot to do, but he commanded his presence and then the character that he's playing and everything else. You can get to see him, at least on the TV screen so far, fight as White Tiger. And it's just really sad that this is all we're going to be able to see in this season, that we're going to see of him as White Tiger.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was gonna go there next as well. They did a nice tribute to him, in memory of him at the beginning of this, and it's feeling very much. I don't know if you felt this way or not, but it feels very much similar to the vibe around Ray Stevenson when he passed before Ahsoka came out, and he got that brilliant performance from him in that season of that show. I'm hoping we get some of that from Carlos in this season, that, you know, he gets to really embody the White Tiger. He gets some time to shine. He was really solid in what we've seen from him so far, so I'm hoping to, you know, see what all they do with him for the rest of the season. It seems like he's going to play kind of a pretty critical part in this, maybe going into the next, you know, few episodes, but we'll see where it really goes with him. But yeah, it was a really cool tribute to him at the beginning of the second episode, where they were like, you know, in memory of him, and just, you know, really spotlighting him in this episode. And I'm excited to see what the rest of the season does to play out for him, and which, unfortunately, until they decide what they're doing, we don't know if he's gonna make it through this season or not. But you know, with his unfortunate passing, this is the last thing we'll get to see from him. So, you know, kudos to, you know, giving that love to him in this, and seeing what they do with him this season is gonna be fun to watch.
You also got the introduction of Michael Gandolfini as Daniel Blade in episode 2 as well. So he's this kind of young kid who steps into Fisk's political career. So he went out and went door to door and got like 2,000 people or something signed up. And, you know, Fisk is questioning a little bit before he's elected mayor about stuff. And he just steps up and he's just telling Fisk everything he wants to hear. So he immediately becomes his right-hand man.
Of course.
And it's going to be interesting. It's a lot of fun to see Michael in this series and doing that and everything, and getting to see him get a pretty decent sized role. And it's going to be interesting to see how that character evolves, because he's connected to BB. He's the one who got her the interview with Fisk, but he kind of regretted it afterwards because she went after him. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with his characters we go through, because we know he had Wesley in the original Daredevil series. He's kind of replacing his Wesley with Daniel Blade a little bit, and it's a different way because it's political and not the crime syndicate that he was doing, because that's his wife's stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how that character evolves, and if he tries to turn him more into a Wesley, if he gets triggered and he falls back even more into his old ways, if he really changes Daniel into something different.
Yeah, I think we've really got a really fun, first 2 episodes here. I'm so excited that this show is back. I think it's real, minus the little bit of nitpicks that we had with some of the CGI and stuff. I think it was fun the way they shot these first 2 episodes. I think you get a lot of that feel from Daredevil from the original. Obviously, they're paying respects to what happened in the first by calling back to so many different things and moving them forward in a way that kind of respects and honors the first 3 seasons that we did get. But I'm so excited to see where they take this story moving forward, because you got some really juicy tidbits of stuff to kind of lean into, to go forward with. Like, obviously, Matt coming to that realization that no matter what he does, he can't truly escape from being Daredevil. And you really only get like 30 seconds to a couple minutes maybe of him in the suit in the first episode, and he's back out of it again until what I'm assuming is going to be the next 1 or 2 episodes. But I know everybody got kind of bent out of shape when they talked about like he wasn't going to be in the suit that much during the first time they tried shooting the series before they scrapped it and redid it. And it seems like they still kind of went back to that well a little bit, because obviously he's not really donning the suit yet. We know he's going to wind up in it because you've seen footage from the trailers and everything that shows he's going to get back in the suit eventually. But I'm glad I think they did it this way to kind of put people's minds at ease. Like, are they really going to have him out of the suit for this entire run of the show? Well, judging by the end of episode 2, we don't have that much longer to wait before he's back in the red suit. I'm excited to see, the suit room where he maybe puts it back on and there's all the different iterations of the suit. Does he go back to the red one? Does he not? You don't know. Like, you see it in the trailer, but maybe that's kind of a red herring kind of thing, and he's wearing different. You never know. But we'll see. But I'm excited for where they're going forward, because there are a lot of different threads that they're throwing out there right now that have a lot of fun things to keep track of. You've got Fisk's political career. You've got him trying to save his marriage at the same time while also trying to run the city. You've got Matt dealing with, trying to not be Daredevil, but coming to the realization that he has to be. You have the stuff with Hector. You have, BB's story, where it's going to go. Then you've got what we know is coming. It's the integration of, Frank Castle. How's he gonna play a role in this? What's the meaning behind the skull tattoos that the cops are having? Are they with Castle? Is Castle bad again? Like, you don't know, because Castle does tend to walk that line if you know his history in the comics. Like, he's kind of an anti-hero, but we don't know what iteration of Frank Castle we're getting here. Is he going to be more on the villain side and doing some more extreme things? We don't know. And it's going to be fun to see where they take us for the rest of the season.
Yeah, we already know there's a season 2. It's already filming, but we also kind of looking ahead. It's only 9 episodes. Is there going to be anything here that's going to tie into Doomsday or Secret Wars, or is that going to be saved for season 2? Because we've already got confirmation season 2 will be out in 2026.
Yeah.
We don't know if that's going to be before or after, Doomsday, because Doomsday is due out in 2026, so we don't know with season 2 coming out the same year if there's going to be some sort of time, because we don't know outside of this series, which they do talk like now they want to run it for quite a while, if he's going to show up in our Avengers films, which I really hope we do. I want to see his interaction more, because we still want to see Spider-Man and Daredevil and Kingpin all interacting. I mean, we got Matt and we got Peter, but we want to see that interaction. We don't know if we're going to get that in Spider-Man 4 as well. So there's a lot that's going on that can be tied to Daredevil with Spider-Man 4 and Doomsday and Secret Wars. We have a lot that can connect to Daredevil that we'll see if we get any small threads opening up as this season goes on.
I was gonna say that, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I really feel like you're much more likely, in my opinion, based on the fact that Fisk talks about people in a spider costume. I know there's been talks of moving Spider-Man 4 into a more grounded street level hero again, to kind of be that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man kind of thing. And I think you're going to get that Daredevil integration into that in some way, shape, or form. I think you'll get you're much more likely to get that tied into Spider-Man than maybe you will Avengers. Mm-hmm. And that could be the case. I hope it's not. Like you said, I would love to see the Punisher involved in some of these bigger Avengers stories. Mm-hmm. Get Daredevil, and Daredevil is very much tied into Avengers as well. Like, you have these guys that haven't had a chance to get in there yet, but you see that slow incorporation. Just the mention of a guy in a spider suit.
It's like MCU now, so anything is possible.
It's in there, and there's a possibility for it, and I'm here for the ride. I'm here for the journey. I was so happy with the way these first 2 episodes went, because like I said, they paid so much respects to what happened before. They honored things, and they're moving things forward in a way that pays a lot of respect to what happened, and in a way that makes sense moving forward, that they're not just jumping into something brand new while completely ignoring everything that happened before. You have... if you watch the show, you see the callbacks, you see the history, you see it moving forward. I'm interested to see what they do with Bullseye for the rest of the season, because if you paid attention to the credits, he's one of the first names mentioned in the credits. So you got to feel like he's going to be an important character in this show as well. So you still have the Bullseye thing kind of hanging out. How much of a factor is he going to play into the rest of the season as well? So a lot of things to look forward to, but this was a really great first 2 episodes for them to kick off in the show, and I'm so thankful that we get this new content again. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this since they announced it was coming back. We've literally been talking about it, I feel like, since the start of this podcast, just by how much we love the show. I know I talk about it with several other friends who are in love with the show as well. It was very exciting for all of us to finally get this new content, get this show back, and get some new Daredevil stories moving forward. I'm really excited to see where they take it.
Yes, there's a little hesitance going into it, just because, it got canceled on Netflix in 2018. It was part of the MCU, but it wasn't part of the MCU, so we weren't exactly sure how they were going to do it. Then they started filming the show. There's tons of issues. They end up getting new showrunners. They start over, even though I think there's like 3 episodes worth of content that they did film in that original iteration that they are using in this. So we know there's probably going to be some growing pains and changes that's going to have to happen, because they're using that, but they've kind of got to shift the direction away from what they used and go forward with that going on. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm happy of how it turned out. There's been a little discourse online about how people feel about it, but it's the internet. Everyone hates and doesn't like anything anymore. Energy, so but if we were to give these episodes a rating, which we don't do a whole lot when we're doing the TV breakdowns, we wait until the season's over, I would give these 2 episodes a solid like 8.5. Like, the original series was a 10 for me. it started off good. It had a few problems and issues and stuff, but it started out really solidly. I think it did some really good jobs. I love the one shot, but it did take me out with how much CGI they used in that one shot. That was the thing about those one shots from the Netflix series, is that they were done practically, and you were seeing stuff done with trickery, and it had a little too much CGI in it for me, which that took the episode 1 down. 2 was a solid episode. I think there were still some things that we're waiting to see happen that, they've retconned and they've changed and stuff, but this is a very solid start for Daredevil Born Again.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see where they take the rest of this show. I'm not going to give it a rating just yet because I kind of want to see how the narrative plays out for the rest of the season, but it's off to a very strong start in my opinion. Like, a couple of the little CG issues aside, I think they'll have that ironed out for the rest of it moving forward. And to kind of play off what you were saying earlier about them having 3 episodes worth of footage, I'm wondering if it is the White Tiger stuff, because he did pass at the end of 2023, so they were still shooting this into last
probably
year.
A good amount of
I would say
stuff.
of what they kept is probably honoring his memory and keeping some of that White Tiger stuff in there. So that could be kind of what they're keeping in to kind of keep the story moving forward. So I'm wondering if that's what they've.
It's probably a good amount of it.
I'd say it's a pretty educated guess that that's what they've kept into the rest of these. But hearing some of the early returns on these episodes from people who've gotten to see the entire season, who got spoiled, I want that opportunity. Please give me access to all these episodes. Like, I couldn't tell you what I would do if I had access to all 10 of these right now, but
we are hearing the 9th episode is an insane, incredible episode, and then it does start off a little slow, but once it hits, it's like one of the best MCU shows out, and I can see that it's starting off very strong. Like, I gave my ratings just because I was just trying to think of how I feel about it coming out after these 2 episodes, and I would still give it a solid job. It's not up to par of the Netflix series as quite, but I think it's going to get there because I'm taking into my mind of everything that happened with production and with the stories and everything that they had to change, that it's going to have a little bit of a bumpy path here. Season 2 is a one that I'm thinking is really going to take this show off.
I think it will too, but I'm willing to let it play out for now because we still got 7 more episodes to get through. We're going to be along for this ride for the entire run. I think there's only one more week where they're dropping 2 episodes in a week.
I think it's episode 5 and 6.
I think it's 5 and 6 as well, but otherwise it's going to be individual episodes dropping weekly. I'm so excited to kind of go along this journey now for a week by week. I love when we get to do these and kind of break them down without having access to the entire season, where we have to sit down and watch this for 10 hours. Don't get me wrong, I love doing it, and I would do it in a heartbeat if that's what we were faced with. But the fact that we can kind of go along this journey and we can kind of take a breath and we kind of dissect it and we get that anticipation of what's coming next with the quality of a show like this, I have no problem doing that. And I'm excited to kind of build that anticipation for what's coming next and kind of taking these episodes as they come and kind of dissecting them and seeing how it plays out in the overall story. So I'm really excited to take that journey. So it's gonna be a lot of fun to go along in this ride, and I'm so excited for the next several weeks that we have this show locked in to talk about. Because, like I said, I love Daredevil so much. I'm so happy that it's back. We got new content. We can digest it. We can talk about it. We can watch it. I plan on watching this several more times before.
I was going to say, I know once all the episodes are out, we both will be binge watching the entire series.
100%.
First season again. And it does, I think it's April 15th is when we're right now supposed to get the final episode. So we do have that journey to go through. Like, we just had Penguin on the DC side. That was such an amazing show to watch week by week and go through that, and I'm really excited to see where Daredevil Born Again goes from here.
Excited. Daredevil Born Again, the first 2 episodes are out on Disney Plus right now. Go check it out. Come to our Discord, come to our social media posts. Let us know if you've watched it. Tell us what you love about the show. If you didn't like something about it, if something really grinded your gears, like Brad here, who's not a fan of CG at all, come and let us know about it.
It just sticks out to me too much.
I
don't know. It's a designer in me, I guess. It just sticks out.
I love that those are the things you get that really drive down a show.
Why did you use papyrus font?
Right.
I'm looking at you, Avatar.
but I get what you're saying though. But it's fun to like look at them through the lens that we look at them in. Like you have your designer, mind and things like that. I always try to give some of these like the benefit of the doubt of not taking some of the back history of something into account when you're looking at it fresh for the first time. Like I know you said you had trouble like getting through the issues that they had in production. To be honest, when I went and watched this, wasn't thinking about it at all. Like it didn't enter my brain, and it's fun to like that we have like different perspectives when it comes to that and how it affects our viewing, because it is things that people take into account. If you're like a big fan of something like this, like we both are, that we're so in tune with things that happened while they were filming and the stories that came out of that we've talked about, that it can have an effect on how you digest the new content when it does finally come out, and you have those things sitting in your brain like it did, and my ability to completely disassociate from that and kind of just take it as it is. And we still ultimately, I think, wound up in the same place as far as our enjoyment of the show and things that we pick up on, and the enjoyment that we got out of it. We still got to the same place. So it's not saying that one way is the right way to watch a show or anything, but it's kind of cool to see like this is where you're coming from, because I was thinking about this while I was watching, and then I come at it with like this is how I watched it. Just mind wipe and let's go and let's take it in and let's see what happens. And it's fun. It's fun to see to have that conversation, to like, this is why I love talking about stuff as much as I do, is because nobody looks at something the exact same way as somebody. Like, like we agree more often than not within a pretty close score when we score things, and we find similar things and we pick out similar things, but still coming at it from different angles it's fun to talk about. And it really, in my opinion, helps give that realness that we're kind of hoping for when it comes to doing these reviews. And the way we look at it is similar but different. And I kind of enjoy that dynamic that we have.
Is being a writer and a craft designer and stuff, that I do kind of look at that. Like, I'm looking for the depth of the story, and I'm also looking at the visual presentation and how they do things like that. And CGI does stand out to me. So I'm looking at stuff like, okay, I can immediately see that's off. They could have done, my brain goes into that, they could have done this better. So, but yeah, it's really interesting to have that type of viewpoint, even though I may have a different viewpoint on things because of that we did end up getting to a similar place in the end. Even though you weren't looking for it, it might have been quietly there in the back of your head, or if you didn't at all, like, we still got to the same point, even though I was just dissecting it a little bit more, because I'm looking, you can't help but compare to the original Netflix series because it was so good, and see where the characters have gone and where the MCU has gone, but also where special effects and stuff is. And then when you get to show that has a decent sized budget and has these important characters, and they start off with episode 1 kind of being a little rough with the special effects, I'm like, okay, hopefully it's not a sign of things to come, and we get back to the more grounded practical stuff, because it's always in the back of my mind with the Matrix as being the biggest example of it, that the first Matrix film was so fantastic to everybody because everything was practical, as practical as you could be. They set up, new camera rigs, and they're using, line and everything else to do all the movements. And then you get into the second and third one, and they did 90% of that stuff in CGI. It's like, stick to what was making it good, the practicality of it, and not just go and do something like throw CG over it, instead of actually giving us those fantastic one-shot fight scenes that are all them. Even if you're switching out stunt doubles and everything else, you're keeping us in that moment. Bad CGI can absolutely take you out of a moment.
Oh, for sure. It absolutely can. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. Mm-hmm. And then that's always an argument that we have. Like, is it too VFX heavy? And it speaks to, our love for a movie like Godzilla -1 that we like to come to. If you're playing the drinking game of watching this podcast, there's your Godzilla -1 reference. Do a shot. It's time. But no, like you said, it's something that's not VFX heavy, that's a little bit more practical, that still, doesn't diminish the quality of a show. Like, I agree with you. Like, it looked a little off when you were watching it. But yeah, like, I'm excited to see where they take it. Like, I hope they don't lean more into that as they move forward and you get more elaborate fights and they are done more practically, but time will tell. We got, several more weeks, thankfully, that we can, watch this show and kind of nitpick, and I'm excited to take that journey, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so heading into next week, we do have an interesting mix of films out in theaters. So we have Black Bag, which is Michael Fassbender, Kate Blanchett, kind of a spy thriller film that looks pretty interesting. We also have Opus, that I haven't seen a whole lot on, but it's got Ayo Edebiri and John Malkovich. It's a drama that's going to be coming out. And probably if you've been to a movie theater in the last month, you've seen the trailers for Novocaine. This is the Jack Quaid kind of crazy, over-the-top action film, action comedy film, where he can't feel pain at all, so he's just doing whatever he can because a girl that he likes has been kidnapped and he's trying to track her down. And then lastly, I haven't seen it pop up in our area yet, which is disappointing because we know if you followed Warner Brothers at all, they canceled a Looney Tunes and Acme movie a couple years back now that they're not allowing anybody to see. And we finally have, the day the Earth blew up, a Looney Tunes movie is coming out. You're seeing some love for these old classic characters coming out, but I haven't seen it in our neck of the woods at all. So I don't know if it's getting a limited release or what's going on with it, but it still seems like they don't know what they want to do with these characters.
Yeah, it's a bummer that it's not getting a wider release, and we have access to the three of the big theater chains, with Regal and AMC and Cinemark, and it's really it's really disappointing that it's not getting a wider release for sure. I'm super stoked to see Black Bag. That the trailer for that looks really cool. I'm excited to see that one. Novocaine just looks like a ton of fun. Like that's going to be a fun one to just kind of, I like to call them turn your brain off and kind of enjoy what happens. And that feels like that. It feels like it's going to be that type of movie. I've heard some early spoiler-free reviews that say that that's a fun one. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about
it. Reminds me of Jason Statham's Crank films.
Absolutely.
And those are fun. Just go turn your brain off and enjoy the ludicrous story and the ludicrous action that it gives you. So if it's as similar to that, then it should be a lot of fun.
I'm all for it.
Over on the streaming side, we have the Russo brothers film The Electric State on Netflix on March 14th. So this has Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown. It looks interesting. We've heard some decent amount on it, but it's going to be really curious. This is one... Pretty much a lot of the films that they have done after Avengers haven't done that well. After they left the MCU and they started doing a lot of their own stuff, not a lot of the films have gotten some great reviews. So it's going to be interesting to see how they take this. And then especially that they're jumping back into the MCU. Is the MCU basically the place that they're going to be living and staying at if the reviews aren't great for The Electric State? It looks interesting, but it's another kind of quirky sci-fi film, and we'll see if they can nail what they're trying to do with it. But it's still that weird thing, like it's going to streaming and not going on a theatrical release. So does that mean was it always meant to be streaming, sure, or they not have enough faith in it to make it a theatrical run?
And as we've talked about, there's a big debate going on in the industry right now about keeping movies in the theater, stuff like that. But with Netflix in play like that, it's always a toss of the coin. Like if you keep it in the theater or not, if it goes in the theater, is it going to be on a limited release? Is it going to streaming too quickly? Is it bypassing theaters to go to streaming immediately a bad thing for a film like this? You never know. Like it's one that I'm excited to check out just because of who's involved in it. I'm going to give it a chance to watch it, and we'll see if it winds up being any good or not.
And I think Netflix just said something like they're putting $26 billion into their productions this year or the next couple years, and they're like, that's not even the ceiling. So they're like, okay, yeah, we got money to spend, and we're going to keep cranking out TV shows and movies for Netflix.
Absolutely. Just keep giving us good content. I'm here for it.
And I will say that we have coming up on March 17th on Hulu, we have the 4-time now Oscar award-winning film Anora will be streaming on Hulu then. So that one caught a lot of people by surprise. We didn't have it showing around us to be able to check it out. It cleaned up at the Oscars. It took several awards that a lot of people thought were going to other actresses or films, but ended up taking home 4 Oscars.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. It was a huge hit at the Oscars, man. It was a kind of a huge upset that an independent film like that's not really attached to a major studio wins and kind of cleans up at the awards. Took a lot of people by surprise. I have seen the movie now. It is really good. I would say it's Oscar worthy for sure. It tells a really gritty story and is really well acted, especially the actress that won for Mikey Madison, who won for best actress, that won for that, is phenomenal in that movie. Definitely one to check out. It's definitely not for the kids though, because it deals with very adult things, but definitely one worth checking out for sure.
I love when she won. They're like, she's the first Ghostface killer to win an Oscar.
Yeah. Which is cool because, coming from the horror world and Scream, and now look at her, she's an Academy Award-winning actress, so congratulations, Mikey, for that. But, yeah, Anora's definitely one, if you have Hulu, check it out.
Over on the TV side, we have Wheel of Time Season 3 on Amazon Prime Video that will launch on March 13th. So that's one I've always wanted to check out, but I just haven't, out of the 357,000 different shows that are out there to watch, I haven't been able to check out.
Yeah, that's definitely one I've been wanting to watch for a minute too, but good on them for getting Season 3. It's coming out. Eventually we'll get around to checking that one out too, for sure. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Can't thank you enough for your continued support. Coming up next week, we will be reviewing the film Novocaine as well as episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again. Looking forward to checking those out and talking about it next week. But until then, I'm Josh. He's Brad. We'll see you next time.